well known. She is certainly one of the great experts in agriculture as it regards risk management. And because of her personal experiences, she's very good at what she does, and she takes to heart the work that she does for her clients. So she's driven up here from Abilene, Texas, from Taylor County. And Donna, it's so good to have you here in Canadian Hemphill County. And ladies and gentlemen, she was the sponsor of our lunch today. Help me show her our gratitude and welcome to Donna Hughes.
Thank you, Andy. I really appreciate the opportunity. He's so kind with all that he does and says for his speakers, for sure. I told you a little bit about myself before, so you want to know who this guy is here. This is my partner, Kirk Donspach. He's a cow-calf producer from Montana, and when I tell you it's, this part of the business, it's, it's not a I know it all kind of deal. Once you start thinking that, just like in marketing for your cattle, I'm sure, that's when you start getting yourself in trouble. And so I've had the good fortune to have a lot of good partners over the years for different aspects of my business. And he happened to be at a conference that I was holding with a cattle buyer up in Montana. And he was a client of the buyer's. And after the presentation, he said, I want to be a broker. I want to work with my neighbors to help them because we're an underserved demographic here in this area of the country. And so he worked to get his broker's license. He had been a client of another broker for about 15 years. On his family's cow-calf production up there, third generation. And so we took him on board, and he's been a great asset to our company, a great partner to work with. We've done a lot of seminars in Montana, Idaho, Texas together. And he writes a phenomenal newsletter. It's called the Cattleman's Advisory. And I'll have some more information about that. I also write a newsletter that comes out in the morning with markets for grains, cotton, livestock. Kind of gives you an update of what's gone on in the markets overnight, what we're thinking, trade recommendations, that sort of thing. So, and I've got some other materials in the back if anybody's interested. But Kirk's definitely taught me a lot about the production side of cattle. I was talking to one of the gals here earlier about how, you sit behind a desk all day and you're crunching numbers. It's all about the numbers, but, who teaches you about the production side when you're a broker behind a desk and you're up in Chicago? Folks like Kirk do that for me, and since I've been blessed to be in Texas the last 20 years, I've learned so much from my producers and from the folks at Extension. If I didn't have those two aspects of my business, I probably would have went back to Chicago and sold shoes or something. So this is a disclaimer in our business. We have to tell you that everything you put with us, you could lose. Isn't that encouraging? It kind of tells you a little bit more about, our responsibility to you. And this is something regulatory-wise that we have to put on all of our presentations. So again, Kirk's story, he's licensed what we call associated person, the same as I am. He's got a 400 head cow-calf operation in Roy, Montana, which is kind of right in the middle of the state by Lewistown. And he's also got 50 head of home-raised yearlings that he's working with. So, hedging. What is hedging? There's a lot of folks I've come across over the years. They either don't know what hedging is, they've heard about hedging because their neighbor had a horror story, or they knew just a little bit about it from that college course that they took more than a few years ago. But for us, hedging is what helps a producer to protect value of what you grow, what you raise, your livestock, your crops. It's also something that end users use. Anybody who would be needing to use beef for beef products, such as a packer, a grain elevator who's going to be selling, doing some milling, that sort of thing. So in our business, we work both sides of the hedge. We do the long side and the short side. So there's two sides to hedging. 5 basic principles that we've come up with to try to be successful with this deal. You always have to assume that you could be half right or half wrong. Nothing wrong with that. Kind of easy to switch gears when you take it that way. You have to be consistent. It's kind of like farming and ranching. You're not in it for a year or for 2 years. You're going to have a good year. You're going to have a bad year. You're going to have some not so bad, not so good years. But you keep at it, and you keep going to your plan. You keep doing what you need to do to just keep moving forward, learning from every experience that you have, and hopefully you're with somebody who's going to be a teacher for you. That's one of the things that I've come across with customers who are working with brokers or other firms. They say, well, I had this position on, but I don't have a clue as to what it was about. Or this option expired worthless, and I really don't understand why I even had it on. So that's one of the things that I take pride in doing. When I work with producers, it's kind of like a know your customer. You have to know what's going on, what everything's all about with that production. But I ask producers, look, if you want to get ahead, you want to feel more comfortable, you want to utilize this thing, make it a good tool for your toolbox, give me some time with you, and you work with me, I'll work with you, we have patience with each other, and I'm going to get you to where you need to be in order to be able to utilize this with more comfort. So, futures markets. A lot of people, I don't deal with that, I don't want to do it. I could have put an addition on my house for what I spent on futures a couple years ago. Or one of the biggest is my wife will not let me. And it's because of some bad experience, and that's one of the things that as a broker you have to kind of rework, training the brain, because with that bad experience you go back and you figure out, well, why did that happen? One of my first seminars that I did was in Abilene, and this was about 20 years ago, and I had about 70 people that showed up for it. I was the new kid in town. Nobody knew me. I was a woman in a man's world as far as I knew, and it was Texas, and I was from Chicago. So as far as I thought, well, I've got 3 strikes. Let's just give it a go. We sent out the invitations, and here all these folks are. Let's have a good dinner, and maybe I can get out alive. And basically, we had a great evening, a good seminar. Everything went fine, except for at the very end, one of the producers stood up and said, I hear what you're saying, and it was a good presentation, but all I know is I sent a bunch of money to Chicago, and I never got a dime back. And I thought, well, tell me your story. What happened with it? I said, did you understand what happened with your hedge? Nope, I sure didn't. How much did you get for your cash trade, your cash cattle? Were you happy with that price? Oh, I loved it. Great. Best money I got in a long while. But I had to keep putting money into that futures account, and I never got any back. And I said, did your broker explain to you why that happened? And he said no. So right there, I thought, well, a large part of this is about education. People don't understand why these things happen. So we talked about it. Usually if you're making money on your cash side, you probably are losing money in your futures account. But if you're locking in a sale that you're comfortable with, then you should be happy. So by the end of the seminar, needless to say, he walked away. He understood a little bit more, and I don't think he felt so bad about that broker that he had held that grudge with for a while. But every day, whether you're involved with the markets or not, in your brain, you are involved. Because if you don't do something, The markets are going to trade. It's going to affect cash prices. It's going to affect just about everything that involves what your production is. So what we encourage producers to do is to make a plan, figure out what it is you need to cover, what are your break-evens, what are your goals as far as pricing and all that goes. Make a plan. How do I get there? What can help me to get there? Because as we go throughout the year, we can always tweak the plan as markets move, still trying to protect what your bottom line is. But at least you kind of have a roadmap, and you could start from there and you can always adjust. So a couple ways that we do hedging. First is the futures market. And I know this is probably a rerun for some of you who have already been involved in markets, but I think this is good for our people that are here today from the college. I think, like I said before, whatever job you go into in this industry, having a little bit of background on this is always helpful. Futures move in relation to the cash market. Some might argue that point. They're subject to delivery, which means if you have a long position and it's what we call spot month, then you could be subject to having those cattle show up at a delivery point with your name on it. It's also subject to margin. Ooh, that's a bad word. Margin is kind of like a deposit on a position. So, if you want to go long or go short a futures position, the exchange and the company that you're dealing with will require you to put up a deposit, and it's a percentage of the value of the contract that you're dealing with. So for feeder cattle and for live cattle in this situation, I think we're talking at about $2,500 per contract, and that's a whole lot less money than having to pay for a full contract of value. With futures, as the market moves, it's going to be valued penny for penny, dollar for dollar to the upside or the downside, and it functions as a sale price. So if you go short futures and it's a hedge, you're wanting to sell that production at that price. Now, something that they came up with more than a few years ago are options, which are derivatives on futures contracts. I like to deal with options with the crowd that I usually am trading with, because what it does is it puts in a floor value for your production, but it also leaves the top side open, which is not true with futures alone. So if you buy an option, depending on if you're a short hedger or a long hedger, what side of the market you're on. If you are hedging for downside risk, you're going to be doing a put option. If you're hedging for upside, then you're going to be doing a call option. And these are derivatives, so they're not going to move penny for penny, dollar for dollar with what the futures market is doing. They trade by what we call a delta. And so, let's just say if Kansas City wheat is trading at $8 and I want to do a put option, an $8 put, and the market starts going down, if the market goes down 5 cents, that put option is not going to increase by 5 cents right away. It's probably trading at a 40 to 45% delta, which means that you're going to get half of that market move credited to your account. There's a couple of things that affect option value. One of them is volatility of the market. So if I tried to buy that $8 put today and the market was extremely volatile, it might cost me 15 cents. But on a day where there's not a whole lot going on and the market is very quiet and everything's going the same, it may only cost me maybe 8 cents. So volatility will pump up the price of options. Time value, the difference between today and when that option is going to come to fruition. That's something else that kind of whittles away. That's the time value you will never get back because it's kind of like paying for an insurance policy for your house. You know, if you want to insure your house for 12 months, it's going to cost more to do that than a 6-month policy. So volatility and time value and how close you are to the market. If you're right near the market, it's going to cost you more because you want to lock in that near-term value. If you go out from there, if I were to do like a $7.50 put basis an $8 market, then maybe it might only cost me a nickel. But then I've lost 50 cents of coverage. So it just depends on what it is you're trying to accomplish. So with the long put option, you have the right but not the obligation to sell a futures contract at a specified price. And on a call option, you have the right but not the obligation to buy a futures contract at a specified price. So you would not be subject to delivery on these, even in the spot month, unless they turned into futures contracts, which is a little bit more to get into. Needless to say, some days it does look like this at the office. You know, when you're dealing with markets, you can either be happy, sad, indifferent. I've been in this business since I was 17 years old, and I swore up and down I would never marry a trader, never, because I don't want that to be in my house, being brought home. And anyway, it could be crazy at times, and but with the A-type personalities that are generally go with it, you know, whether it's someone at a feedlot or a producer or a trader, you kind of find that it's the same type of personality in all aspects of the business. Another tool that we use is LRP insurance, and I know there's probably a few people in here that are familiar with LRP. That's livestock revenue protection. That's a policy that is subsidized by the government, and it kind of works like a put option. And with LRP insurance, it's not traded on the exchange, but the neat thing is that with somebody like myself, with an LRP policy, we can trade in and around the LRP policy value in order to enhance it, possibly pay for it. There's a lot of different things we can do with futures and options markets to help enhance the value of the LRP. They have LRP policies for feeder cattle, and they have LRP policies for fed cattle. And each of them are broken down into weight categories, and there's different things that specify what a producer would want to do as far as coverage. You've got your weights, you've got the county that you're located in. You can go anywhere from 1 head of cattle up to the crop year limit, which is something that you can't do with futures and options because those are set contracts on the exchange, 50,000 pound loads for feeders and 40,000 for cattle, but if you're for live cattle. But if you're a small producer and you've got maybe 10 head of cattle that you want to cover, LRP would be a good thing to look into. The feeder cattle policy is settled to the CME feeder cattle index, which is traded on the exchange, and then there's adjustments based on, you know, if it's heifers, if it's unborn steers and unborn calves, you know, different categories. And then the fed cattle contract is settled to the USDA AMS price that's published on that expiration date. So we always have to take into account basis, and all of you know this, difference between the futures price and the cash price, which in different regions it's going to be different. Different things go into basis in different areas. Kirk had included this. Normal 600-pound calf basis in Montana is plus 20. He was using the March contract, and So, you know, that's something that has to be taken into account along with your, you know, as part of your break-evens and all. This is a great website to get basis for different areas, beefbasis.com. You plug in your state, your county, all the specifics that, that they have listed up here, and it has current and historical information.
So Donna, is there a way to hedge in basis?
There is not. That's the one thing that we can't take care of. And I'm going to show you an example on one of these slides here, as far as you know, trying to gather in price difference. But as far as basis goes, best we could do on that is, you know, try to work with some of the numbers on the existing contracts to maybe include or exclude quantities or something like that. But yeah, very, very tough to even try to do that. Okay, so this is another historical chart that we have here. This kind of gives you an idea of what's gone on with packer margins over the last 5 years or so. Right now we're at somewhere around the average on the 5-year break-even levels. But the point being is that the packers are willing to pour more money into their side of the business. This is a short list of packing plant expansion that we've seen happen, you know, over the near term, with the most recent being that new facility that's going up in Amarillo, which is going to have about a 3,000 head capacity to kill when they start up in 2025. And just the amount of money that's being poured into that end of the business is just staggering. But just kind of reflects on you know, what anticipated demand and where they think this business is going. So we've seen a lot of maps today. This was as of August, soil moisture, and you know, nothing new to us. But it's kind of funny, you know, when Kirk was putting this slide together last year at this time, and as we heard before today, all of that color was pushed up into the west. His area of the west in Montana was going through exactly what we've been going through in the last year. So it kind of switched gears, and now we've got all that going on. This is the cattle inventory report. We've seen these numbers today as well. Some would argue that these numbers here are a little bit low. I know up in Kirk's area, just because of the way things operate up there, you know, he believes his numbers up there are a lot lower. But again, with USDA, they take broad range. So probably one thing I think that emphasizes is that, you know, I've heard from producers a lot, well, you know, how could prices be at this level when I know this is going on in my backyard, or I know this is going on in my state? That doesn't reflect what I'm seeing every day. And the fact is that we're global. We're you know, we've got the entire US as far as these types of numbers go, but globally we have to take into account what's going on in all the other countries overseas, whether it's, you know, production or political policies or anything like that, which right now, you know, the economic stuff is just going crazy, as well as, you know, what we're seeing with Ukraine and the Black Sea and all of that. So that's one thing you have to do, is to keep an open mind. You know, it's not all about what we see out in front of us. Another chart to, you know, get you thinking is break-evens over the last 2 or 3 years. you know, the chart kind of gives you a great idea as to where we're at with all of that and what the anticipation is for next year. And here, the November feeder chart. This was as of late last week. You know, basically we still have the long-term uptrend in place, but you could see we take dips, and this is something that your broker's looking at when they're trying to help you determine what is it you need to do. Where is the market? Where do we think the market's going to go when you have to deliver those cattle? This is one of the tools we use. So a little bit of trivia here. This was last week as well, the price difference between the September feeder contract and the March feeder contract. Right at that point, it was trading at a $5 differential. Well, that spread at one time was up over $20. So that just goes to show you, you know, what the market's thinking about the values as we get out into next year. So when you're going to hedge your sale with an LRP program, this is something that you would be looking at. It's going to tell you the state that you're dealing with, the county, the endorsement length. You can hedge from 13 weeks out to 52 weeks. The commodity, and then what type. In this case, we're hedging feeders, unborn steers and heifers. It's going to be for the 2023 year with an expected ending, let's see here, March 7th of 2023. And the coverage price is $192.93. And the producer premium, what the producer is going to pay is $4.13 a hundredweight. Now, that's not including what the government's going to help with their subsidy. And so in most cases, the LRP programs, depending on what your dollars and cents are going to add up to and all, usually the LRP program tends to be competitive or less than going in for a put option on the futures or financing a futures position. So if you're using LRP and we've got the level locked in at 176 as illustrated on that graph, $4.13 paid, that's what your cost is. So your sale above 176, if you sell above 176, you still have to pay the $4.13. If the market goes down below the 176, then what they'll do is they'll take out as much as they can of that $4.13 premium, and that'll get paid towards your policy, and then the rest is what you've earned on the indemnity. Now, if you do it with a put option, if you locked in a 180 value, this is for the same March time frame, it's at 417. So we're kind of going apples to apples as far as the cost goes, but you see you get different price levels.
What if that goes up above that value though on a put option?
If it goes above the value on the put option, you've already paid the put option premium. You've already paid into that. And so if it settles above that value, then basically you're making your money on the cash side of it, and you've lost all your premium. If I were to buy a 176 put and it cost me 4 cents, if the market settles at 176.01 or 02, then my put option is worthless. If the market settles at 176, and it's at expiration, then that 176 put will turn into a futures position short at 176. I've still lost the $4 premium that I paid into it, and now I've got a 176 futures position, A, I have to pay margin on it, and B, the market could go up, and that would make me lose on the position. So that's why you have to, the timing on these, the cost of them, the implications of the decision, what if, all that has to be looked into, because everybody has a different risk appetite. Everybody has a different pocketbook, so to speak, you know, as far as financing. So that's why it's real important as a broker that I need to know what is it my customer's objective is, what can they handle with risk. Are they working with a banker who understands this enough that is going to be comfortable if we have a margin call or something like that? The other kind of hedge is what we call a collar, and that's where we buy a put option, but then we sell a call to finance it, because we could be so far out that it would just be unaffordable or it wouldn't be wise to spend that much. And in this situation, our put option is going to be bought for $4.97, and we're going to sell a call option for $8.30. And so that's going to reduce the cost of our position, and it's going to have us protected at a price level that's, I got that flipped around, I'm sorry. We're buying the put option at $8.30, we're selling the call at $4.97. So in this case, we're protected from $190 and below, but if the market goes above $196, then basically you've turned it into a futures contract, that call option. You're short the market at 196, and that's what we call putting in the sale, because at 196, if it turns into a futures contract, it's going to cost you a lot more to buy it back than it did for what you sold it for. So again, more margin, more money into the position. A lot of people don't like to do this because they just, number one, it's sometimes they don't understand it well enough to be comfortable with it. And if you're conservative, you don't like having to put more money into it, because what happens if the market, what if it went up to $2 or $2.20? Then that's a lot of money to be putting into a position.
Is that called a covered call?
A covered call?
Is that what that was?
No,
Covered call?
it's a collar. It's a collar.
Do they used to call them covered calls?
Covered calls, I would say a covered call is, you know, if you have a short futures position and then you've got a call option on top of it for upside, that's what we call a theoretical put. Then that would leave your top side open as well.
Options were put there for bankers and traders.
What's that?
The option market was put there for bankers and traders.
Right,
The
right.
banker gets you to lends you the money to buy the put, and the traders get the money and go borrow with it. And you're still sitting out there in the hole. I could go back and get years and years of put options that a banker made me do, and after about 10 years of spending $35,000 a year on puts, I said, look, let's just figure out where I'm gonna lose money at on cattle, and I'll put it on the board, and I'll have me a standing short, and when it hits that number, it'll put me in and sell the cattle.
Exactly. My policy is I'm not a banker, so I don't do the banking.
No, but
And
you're the trader that goes to the bar on my money.
well, first of all, I don't drink. So I may go shopping, but I won't go to the bar.
Back about 4 clicks,
Uh-huh.
we had a 192 call, and it was gonna cost me $4 on the LR, what's it called, the LR?
Oh, the LRP.
Is that it?
Yeah.
One more back, right there.
Uh-huh.
You got started at 192
Uh-huh.
coverage price, and it's gonna cost me $4.19. So does that make it a 198? about a 197 cost to short the cattle?
Basically, what they're doing is they're starting out at the 198, okay? And then what they're saying is you could be covered for just over 97% of that value, which is gonna give you this.
So this is the government program, right?
This is the government program.
So you're not just shorting your cattle at 198, and that's where you start the margin.
There's no margin on this. It's just a one-time premium, you're one and done.
Oh, this is kind of an insurance policy.
This is, it's kind of like your crop insurance. It's a single, it's a single deal. The only thing it doesn't, it's just for price protection. It doesn't cover death loss, anything like that. So it's like a put option in the market. And
So Jerry, the USDA subsidizes part of the cost of this, just like they do crop insurance or rainfall insurance.
Okay.
And just for the record, there's people in this room right now that have really profited from this LRP in the last couple of years. This is really a very serious way to utilize risk protection, and Donna, I appreciate you presenting it to us today.
I didn't know they even had these.
Yeah, well, that's why we're showing you this, so you know.
well, see, and they used to have this, a few years back as well, but they've made some changes to it, which makes it more appealing for cattle producers. Number one is the government didn't subsidize it. So why not go into the futures market? If you're going to do a put option or you're going to do this, you're still having to pay for it either way. So they've done a couple of things to make it more appealing, more favorable for producers. The only thing is I would encourage y'all, if you do consider this, because we've had clients that have really been wanting to get on board with this deal, and then we crunched the numbers, and it turns out that, whatever money you would have put, depending on your situation, whatever money you would have put towards the LRP insurance, we could use that same money and work something in the futures market with futures and or options that would utilize it in a better way. And I think that's the difference between, just jumping right into it, thinking it's, the end all for, not having to worry about getting stuck with margins and that sort of thing, a one and done. But if you do your math, if you look into really what it is you need and what you need covered, then sometimes this is not what you should do. And I'll get into some of that in a little bit here as well. Okay, so this was the collar. Now with the collar, your hedge profit is going to start from this level down if the market goes lower. So you'll be okay with selling that call up top. But if the market goes higher, then you're going to have to make up anything above that 196 level. For every dollar it goes up, that's $500 out of your pocket. And sometimes that doesn't work out too well, depending on what's going on with the way the trade's going.
Okay, with the LRP, I didn't think you had to do any margin calls.
When you say market costs, what do you?
Margin calls.
Oh, no, there are no margin calls on LRP.
What were you just showing us?
This was the call, the put call
okay.
collar.
Okay, I'm with you.
That's okay. That's all right. I skipped ahead a few from where we were at.
I've been down that road buying puts and selling calls, and then the market took off.
Didn't feel comfortable, did it?
No.
See, that's why I'm telling y'all. I mean, I know my customers, and I do have some what my friends in Chicago would call gunslingers, and they're all day, every day futures, and they're comfortable. I can hear the excitement in their voice, kind of thing. But for the most part, I mean, everybody is pretty much conservative. You don't want to have to be, blowing money where you don't have to. You don't want to have a bad feeling, well, why did I do that kind of thing. That's why the understanding and education of it becomes so important, because even when you do lose the money in a conservative way, you understand what happened and why that's okay, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I know.
Terry Scott used to put your order in live on the intercom.
Uh-huh.
And you'd hear that guy, hey, we got another sucker.
Well, I want to tell you, I worked on the floor, and I never heard anybody say that, so it must have been in a different pit. Anyway, but yeah, there's a lot of stories out there. I mean, in all honesty, I mean, I've seen them have to drag guys out of the pit because they've had heart attacks, like in the pit, and I mean, it's been crazy. A lot of years with a lot of stories. Anyway, getting back to this, so if you're short futures, you're basically locking in your sale, okay? So again, if the market starts going higher, you're having to make up $500 for every dollar that it goes up. Plus, you are stuck at that sale, which doesn't feel good if you got a 170 sale and the market goes up to 190. Then you may not feel so good about that. But there's ways we can do something to help you get closer to that 190, even with the short futures position. But that's for another day. Okay, so this kind of illustrates, this is something as a broker we would show you. We find out what you need, we find out what your objective and your goals are. We kind of go through all those illustrations, because you walk in the office, you say, I want an LRP program. I want it because my neighbor just showed me his check from the government for $10,000. I want a check for $10,000. Well, let's go through the numbers. So we come up with these illustrations, and as you can see on the far left, that's hedging with the LRP insurance. The next section is hedging with the long put. And what you're going to be concerned about is the green line. Then you've got the long put short call. And then you've got the short futures. So everything comes with a risk reward profile to it. Depends on what you're willing to absorb, what you're willing to deal with, how you like to sleep at night, what your spouse thinks about what you're doing if you have to write checks, that sort of thing.
Especially when they call your wife for margin calls.
Was she on the account?
Ma'am?
Was she on the account with you?
No.
Okay, then they shouldn't have been talking to her. That's just a regulatory thing I'd throw out there. Okay, so this illustrates to you, if I have a producer who says, I don't want to do that short futures deal because I just can't stand margin call, I don't want to put the money out, okay? I'll just go 100% put options. Show me what it'll look like. So a 172 put, you're paying $3 for it. You need to purchase 22 puts in order to cover yourself 100%. And your protection level is 169. You're paying almost $35,000 for your put option, and that would include commission on a conservative basis. Your short futures at 187, and you've got 6 contracts on, okay? So this line here is showing you what is going to happen with the futures, and this is showing you what's going to happen with the, I got it switched around. This is the puts, this is the futures. You can see that the futures, they go straight up, okay, if the market's going lower. If you had those put options versus the futures, the market would have to get down to, let's see here, the market would have to get down to a 160 level from where we started our hedge. A 160 level when the market was at 187 in order to say, okay, I was comfortable doing those put options instead of the futures, if that makes sense. So that just kind of gives you an idea how it would work in either case. But again, it's about your risk tolerance. Kansas City wheat, they have options on that as well. A lot of times we have producers, that'll come to us for to hedge wheat as part of their profile. I won't go into this so much. I think you all get the idea. So this is, he's a cute little fella, isn't he? This is a graph from back in May of 2020. And for those who had cattle back then and you didn't do anything, this is what the chart looked like. It was a relatively short period of time. We went from 160 down to almost 130. That's a lot of landscape to cover. We all know who that is. And he's scratching his head because I don't know if he's ever done anything with futures. This is the information for Kirk's Cattlemen's Advisory. I would encourage you all to give it a try. It's no obligation, and he gives a lot of insights to the cash markets, how it relates to the futures markets when there's USDA reports, such as today we had WASD. He'll give you a rundown of the numbers and tell you what his thoughts are on it. He gives hedging recommendations, tells you, what he thinks you should be doing for purchases and sales for next March, what you should be doing for fall sales for this, this fall coming up, November time frame. But he's a great guy, and he's in the thick of it. The producers like him because he's got skin in the game, and he's conservative. He's not someone who, takes this lightly. He knows what the dollar means to each and every one of you because he's in the same boat. And his contact information is there if you want to reach out to him. But anyway, that's all I have for you today. Does anybody have any questions?
What's the price of the contract now?
Of what contract?
Just feeder cattle or live cattle?
Feeders are live? Well, let's take a look.
What we gotta have up front?
Oh, and the margin?
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's 2,800. Okay. Where are you? Okay, it's going to be 1760 on the live and 3135 on the feeders.
Last time I played it was 500.
Oh yeah, no doubt, no doubt. I can't tell y'all. I've been in this business since 1978, and I mean there was no electronic trading, there was no options. We had ags and S&P and currencies, and the S&P was the new guy on the block. And I can't tell you, I mean, over 43 years, it's just been amazing what's happened to trading and the business in general and everything, and the world. We all know that, so, but.
So I think Jerry said a key word there a while ago, play. If you're interested in playing, this isn't for you.
Right.
But if you're interested in risk protection, this is an important subject. Week before last, when I was promoting this event on the radio, the day before I did the radio interview, the price of corn was up 39 cents. So now we're talking about input costs and what Dr. Steffens say about managing risk as it regards input costs. He said, keep your costs low. So using LRP and using the strategies that StoneX through Donna Hughes can help us with, even if you're very conservative, can help you keep your costs low if there's something that you're dealing with that you're using in your cattle operation. So for an example of that, cotton's where we get cottonseed meal that this $600 38% cubes is coming from. So it behooves us as beef cattle producers to be more understanding and to utilize these things, because our world is getting more and more sophisticated. And whether we like it or not, we're gonna have to use some of these tools like LRP. I'm not gonna mention a name, but there's a producer here in our area that has a lot of cattle. And he's been using LRP now for a couple of years. And I mean, he's told me to my face, he said, that's the best thing that I've ever done. They've sent him a lot of checks. And he's been very wise as to how he's used it. This guy happens to be 88 years old, by the way. So anyway, I just want to encourage you, a lot of times when we're not used to something, we're real hesitant about experiencing that opportunity. I get that. But in the case of the volatility and the capital, I mean, guys, when I was these guys' age, you could buy a cow for $300. A good cow. It wasn't long till that was $1,000, and now Justin and Jason have been talking to us this morning about cows costing $3,000 and $4,000. So a truckload of cows, one truckload of cows, 35 cows on a load to make a 50,000 pound load, we're talking about somewhere around 100 grand. 35 cows, that's not very many cows. So are you comfortable going to sleep at night with that kind of investment with no risk protection? You know, I know David Cook's wife, she's in my Sunday school class, and I know she likes security. She likes to be secure. So that's why we have these programs, is to show you the different strategies and options. So Donna, I really appreciate it. Does anybody have a question for Donna? Yes, Jerry.
Is it just 1 year out to the LRP?
52 weeks is the longest that you can go
From
today.
So
And-
August futures right now is at $2. Or $1.9975 something.
Yeah,
And that would be inside, it's from the 52 weeks from today. 2/8.
and what happens is they'll publish it in the afternoon between 3:30 and 4:30 as far as the new pricings, and $199.75. The government will come out between 3:30 and 4:30 every day and give you the new prices from RMA. That's if they publish new prices. Sometimes they don't. But if they do, they'll give you the specific ending dates that you can take the insurance through. And it'll show you at 0.9975 coverage, based on this value, this is what your coverage would be. This is how much government's going to pay, this is how much you would pay. And you can take lesser percentage on that LRP, depending on what you need.
So is this time, like buying a put, all you're doing is buying time?
You're buying,
Does the price change? Would the price be much different than something?
the price,
today?
the price that you lock in on that LRP program, that's your price.
No, but I'm saying, are they usually higher further out? The
It's,
cost of the
it,
goods are higher?
no, they're gonna be around what the futures are currently trading at. They're gonna be very, very similar, just like a point or two off generally. It's not gonna be like $1 off. And then when the contract settles, it settles to the CME feeder cattle index on that date, with the fed cattle contracts going to what AMS is putting out from the government.
You know, Andy, it's gonna be like all these other government programs, a person may need some of that on there, so, because if they claim a disaster somewhere, they're gonna say, well, we had this insurance, did you have it? No, all right, see you later.
There's a lot that needs to be considered with any of this, you know. And again, it goes back to, you know, like you said, you have to take all, you know, all things into consideration, all the what ifs kind of thing. Like today we had a WASD come out, WASD report, the government updated their numbers, corn traded up to $7 for December. And soybeans were up 78 cents. You know, so
one of the things that I wanted to say this morning when Justin was giving his presentation that Donna has just reminded me of, I was in a program in Kansas City a couple of weeks ago, and it was Dan Bossy that was giving the program. Dan's with Ag Source, I believe it's called. He put a graph to show how, considering all food sources in the world, we're almost at the tipping point to be short on food. Mm-hmm. It hasn't happened in decades and decades and decades to the level, but it's a lot of it's because of China. A lot of people don't realize that it's dry in South America right now. It's the EU is in a 500-year drought. There's parts of China. Who can tell me who the number 2 wheat producer is in the world? Dale, you know?
Is it Ukraine?
Nope, it's not Ukraine. Anybody know? Any of you guys from Clarendon?
Russia, China,
India.
India.
India is in a drought right now. So guys, we're in a volatile situation. And that's why it's so important to use the tools that we have in hand to protect ourselves so that our bankers will continue to be our bankers.
right.
I got one more. Can you get out of the position before it expires?
Not the LRP. The LRP, you have to carry it to the end. You have to be qualified to be with the LRP program, which, I mean, you fill out one application, it's usually no problem. That is a one and done kind of thing. If you have to keep your cattle up to 60 days prior to the ending date on this deal, just because of the drought situation. If you happen to sell your cattle early, you can transfer the policy with the cattle. So there's a couple of different caveats that go along with this.
That's a big one.
Yeah, so, I mean, I've had people that have taken it out and, they've had no problem, holding them up to, 60 days beforehand, before the policy expires. So, if you got something expiring the end of September or the middle of September, you have to at least hold the cattle until the middle of July.
No, I'm sitting there looking at $2 feeder cattle in August, that's what I'm looking at.
Well, you could sell them, but you have to retain physical ownership.
Yeah, but if I got dropped out before then I'm really in a pickle.
Well, and I've had that happen, to a few, but they tell me, well, I've got other cattle that I didn't include on that I can,
Oh, you show the banker the same.
Substitute.
thing, and you got 7,000 of them, huh?
So let's give Donna a big round of applause and show our appreciation.